We have to talk about Tesla Robotaxi. Yesterday, I covered in my stock review for that week, Tesla stock review, that the Robotaxi growth trajectory has become a very important point. And today, I want to dig into the Robotaxi tracker. It's an amazing tool, by the way, that you can use and look at the latest and discuss a little bit what we are seeing here and why this is so important. If you're interested in the stock, if you're interested in making Pioneer Alpha and doing alpha trades in supplementing your Tesla stock position with more options trading or do even tactical stuff with your stocks, that is what we have to talk about. So if you look at the Robotaxi tracker, number one, you're seeing 386 total fleet. Okay, that's a pretty good number. Let's look at the entire trajectory here and go a little bit deeper into this chart. So what you see here is we started very slow. Austin here in the beginning, we have June 24th, 11 Robotaxis deployed. Then what happened? We saw in around September 1st, I think, was it September 1st, we started the Bay Area also and had 3 Robotaxis deployed in the Bay Area. All of these actually with drivers that sit behind the wheel in the Bay Area and safety drivers that sit on the passenger seat in Austin. That is required, and that is an additional safety measure by Tesla. Actually, in Texas, it's not required. It's just something Tesla does. They can remove them if they feel ready. But in the Bay Area in California, you cannot do that. You need a critical number of miles and have to submit that to the regulators to be allowed to drive without a driver. That's also why we see this massive rise right now, because Tesla now has nailed it. They know it works. And they are now preparing to submit the miles for complete approval of rider-free taxis. So they're now in the end game to submit that data, because you don't want to collect the data if you're not ready. You want to collect only great data. And I'm going to get to this now. So what you see here, something happened November 23rd. They had this giant leap from 106 to 140, so 40% increase in a couple of days. So something happened here, maybe a confidence booster. They deployed it, and you can interpret these lines actually. You see, well, it's working pretty well, nothing special. They're ramping this up all the way to November 21st in the Bay Area. Then there was this leap that they were more confident, they wanted to test something, but then end of the year, December 30th, they totally changed the trajectory. And Tesla grew the fleet from 153 to an amazing 295. So basically doubling the entire fleet in the Bay Area since beginning of this year, within 6 weeks or 7 weeks now. I think that tells us something when you understand the regulator perspective in California. In order to get this approval, you need to submit your kind of self-driving data that you collect with safety drivers. But you can actually select the starting point. You can't cheat after that, but you have to select the starting point. So what you do is you're busy testing everything, you're fine-tuning the cars, you're doing all these things. But once you're ready to do it, you want to deploy a very large fleet to minimize the time required to get to these 50, 60,000 miles that you actually need to submit. And I think that's exactly what Tesla is doing. I think that was the inflection point around end of last year, where they decided now is time to collect the data that we actually want to submit to the regulators for the next phase to be allowed to do this without a driver. Now, that doesn't mean they're allowed to do it commercially without a driver. That's actually complicated, but this is another phase. I dug into this in a video last year, how the regulations look like. But the first stage of regulations, or the next phase, would be get the permit to do this driverless. I think we're getting very close to the driverless permission in California, which might be, by the way, a little catalyst for the stock if they get this, if they tell us. And that might happen in April or something. So very interesting. For us, big picture, if you zoom out, it's all about the total deployed Robotaxi fleet. And what we are seeing here is just very interesting. Unsupervised is still tiny in Texas, so you still only have 7 truly unsupervised ones. And I expect that number, of course, to be the interesting one. There will be a hockey stick situation where we see that not just doubling, but drastically going through the roof. When will this happen? That is the trillion-dollar question. I do think it's going to happen in the first instance in April. There, I said it, because Cybercab is coming. And Cybercab, you can't even have a person in the passenger seat because it's a 2-seater car. You can't transport passengers with someone in the passenger seat if you only have 2 seats. This is kind of stupid. So they are under pressure by April to to have that solved. And I think then we will see very rapidly the vast majority of the entire Austin fleet being converted into unsupervised. And that will be one piece of a great catalyst. You know, if you would see 100 unsupervised robotaxis in Austin, I think it's a little bit of a catalyst there. And I do think that will happen in April. I said it, because they have right now 89 in Austin, +7. I don't know if it's +7 or including the 7, doesn't matter. So that's happening there. These are the two important variables. How many are unsupervised and how many total do we have? Now, to my prediction, I said 1,800. I said it in the very beginning of last year, when they launched, or in June last year, that April will be the point, April 2026, where Tesla reaches this 1,800 robotaxis, fully commercial, and that will create a forcing function because it generates 5% annualized of free cash flow of 2024 of the entire company. So then you have a significant driver of cash flow. And that will go into the Q2 earnings report, I think, in September, whenever it comes out. Because at that point, it should be significant. And once that happens, it's absolutely game over if we continue the growth. So this is all very exciting. And I do think that by Monday, I'm talking this Monday, we will breach the 450. That's the 400, sorry. Clearly, we will breach the 400, and by Friday next week, by end of February, which is Friday this week, we will breach the 450. And if we do so and then double again to 900 in March, we will be on track to breaking the 1,800 end of April. Exactly as I said. And that will mean April will be the inflection point where the stock will have to go up a lot, by the way. So will it happen? I don't know, but that's my prediction right now. And the key to predict that, to keep predicting it, is watching this number. I think this is the decisive number. This number, of course, is a function indirectly of cybercab production, in my opinion. Let's see what happens there. And these two numbers, why are they so important? Because they give us potential alpha. Because right now we see, if you look at the stock, that the stock is not really moving, right? Hasn't moved. The whole week is flat, even though we see massive growth in Robotaxi. And look at this. This is the stock 1 month. This is year to date. So if you compare year to date, exactly as I explained it, it's a balloon that loses not money too, that loses air. It's losing air, the hype balloon of Tesla. So it's a slight downward move here. Look at this here. What is that? December 19th. Wow, this is exactly like last year. And it slides down and keeps sliding down. I think it will keep sliding down until we hit the inflection point, which actually is in 6 weeks. So there is a sliding down effect where we might end up at 400, even though we are bouncing off that 410. And our alpha here is to observe this line. These lines are incompatible in the long run with each other. You understand? They're incompatible in the long run. If you take 30 days here, that is Robotaxi. And if you take 30 days here, this is the share price. You understand? The share is sliding down while Robotaxi is sliding up. And at some point, that becomes incompatible. And that point will latest be around 900 or something. Latest, probably more at 600, where at least these two charts can't go on like this. And that doesn't mean that at 600 or wherever this point is, there is an inflection and forcing function. No, that happens at 1,800 robotaxis, in my opinion. But it means that the slide has to stop and get reversed. So instead of a balloon losing air, I think when we double this number here, or not even double, doesn't even need to double, but roughly double from here towards 600, 800 robotaxis, the slide will stop and reverse. And will be a balloon that slowly gains air. Will that be at 400 or 410 or 390? Let's see where it is. But at some point now, it's this dramatic clash of these two functions, of the sliding up and the sliding down function. Sliding down of the stock and sliding up of the Robotaxi. I think it will not take more than 2 to 3 weeks from now before this curve will become the driving curve for this curve. And then once we hit the inflection point, we have a hockey stick at our hands. Of course, we don't know what the macro situation is. If macro plays tricks with us, which also might happen in March, by the way, I'm a little concerned. Iran and so on, we might get additional pressure, but I think that is the paradigm that defines Tesla stock at least. So this is my thinking around it. Now you know it. I think that was very helpful for you guys. We have to predict when these inflections happen, and I think this is a very good mental model here. So I hope that was interesting, and see you tomorrow.